I'm keen to move this to the FTSE because we've seen reported in the press that the FTSE has been criticised for employing board members who look like the rest of the board. I think we've heard the grey suit brigade, etc., probably indicative of predominantly male. We've got the 30% club as well, and variety of different reports that has identified there's not enough women on boards, that representation is low and change is slow. I know you've had a great involvement in that and no doubt have an opinion on it. Can you share your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the 30% club is a great idea. I think it's done a great, they've achieved their aim. They have actually met their target. What for me, though, is most worrying is that at the Sue Vinicum from Cranfield University published some research and launched it with the FRC at the beginning of July last year, actually. And the FTSE 100, when you look at their senior leadership team, only has 11% women. And the FTSE 250 is trailing at only 9% women. So even though at board level, actually we've probably done quite a good job in the UK, it's just not translating into what is happening within the organisation. So for me, that's a really big challenge. What is going on here? We've had legislation in the UK since the 1970s, the Equal Pay Act, the Anti-Discrimination Act. So we've had legislation. We've had lots of narrative from the FRC putting it into their code about diversity of thought, all the various Davis reports and those things. So we had the narrative. So we've had legislation, we've had the narrative, and then we've had these various initiatives, but it's still not translating. So only a few years ago, I did a psychology degree and was fascinated by social identity theory, which was from a couple of chaps called Tajfel and Turner. And they did some really interesting work on groups, which is that we are social animals. And we do travel in packs. We form groups because that's actually survival. So if there's scarce resources, you want to be in the power group, the in-group. Well, in organisations, the power group get the resources. So people do want to be in the in-group. So that's why people are ambitious and they want to get into that boardroom. The trouble with this theory, or the trouble with the social group theory, is that once you get into that group, it's really important for you to be accepted. And to be accepted, you sort of have to behave like the group. So I do know lots of women who chair businesses, and they actually call themselves chairman. They will wear trouser suits, they wear black, they adopt the language that is actually quite masculine. So what happens is, they get into the boardroom to bring this diversity of thought. And the danger is that through assimilation, this process, they adopt the norms and values and behaviours of the norm in that in-group. The other problem with this particular social phenomenon is that to be in the in-group, it's a zero-sum game. You promote the in-group at the expense of the out-group, which is where this Queen Bee syndrome came from, which is that, when women get into the boardroom, they might leave behind other women. And that's not because they're bad women. This is just 500 million years of social engineering. It's what we do as social animals. So the challenge, therefore, for me is that, okay, we've had the legislation, we've got all this discourse, we've got this will, it's the right thing to do, social justice, all those things, but we're not seeing social change. So the interesting thing for me is, but there are some organisations that seem to do this quite well. If I look at the Diageo, I think they've got 46% women on their senior leadership team. And I'm interested in ThoughtWorks, because aren't I right? Haven't you also mentioned you've got a very equal...
Yes, so in our UK leadership team, it's 50-50.
Right.
And then across our professional services organisation, we're a technology company, we have 42% women and underrepresented gender minorities, which is treble the industry average. Technology has been prolifically been a male-dominated industry.
Absolutely.
That's very intentional. We focus on making that difference.
Right. That's what I'm curious about. So I'm doing a PhD at the moment on this subject, and that's absolutely what I want to investigate is, in spite of this incredibly powerful and very elegant theory, it has been tested to destruction. In spite of that, there are certain organisations who have managed to do it differently. And it's not to do with policies, because if you look at the policies of the FTSE 100, every single company will have a policy that pretty much uses the same words around equality, diversity, inclusion. But some organisations deliver it very much more than others. And that's I think, a really interesting learning to publish.
And I'm grateful that you raise it, because I think part of the psychology that's interesting is the uniqueness of ThoughtWorks is not only do we check for competency, but we also do a cultural interview. And that really is about not just alignment, but it is about that positive social change. It's that positive impact on society. It's ethics and technology. You started talking about working for John Lewis Partnership and how they were very credible and ethically driven, and decisioning was something that was accountable to all team members. And ThoughtWorks is an organisation that's 28 years old now. Started off as a social experiment, but has continued that flat organisational structure, non-hierarchical, etc., deliberately to prove that you actually can have a positive social organisation that is profit with purpose.
Yeah. Fascinating. I mean, I think that's the whole structure agency thing. You've got this organisation that is this structure, and if you have lots of hierarchy in it, there's power. And as soon as you get power, you get those with power and those without power. And then you've got the agency discussion, which is this whole thing about, but people are individuals and they create their own identity, their own path. They are agents of their own destiny. But actually there's a tension between those two things. And I think it's really interesting that you're saying that actually ThoughtWorks is a very flat organisation. So actually it's taken away a lot of that structure power stuff and actually gives it to the individual to do
be impactful.
Yeah.
So we are seeing a real change in society where shareholders and core citizens are expecting more of corporate business. With your new organisation, it's very much a coaching organisation, and I know that psychology was part of your degree and is very much part of what you do now. What do you anticipate the board of the future is going to look like as corporate organisations are being held far more accountable?
Yeah, so I think that we all understand the world is so complex and change is happening so fast. If you don't have all the different knowledges in the room, you will not succeed. And we've seen the shape of the FTSE 100 change dramatically over the last 10 years. So a lot of the organisations that were more traditional have simply dropped out. And I think that we will see a lot more of that happening if people aren't open to getting true diversity of thought into the boardroom. And that's not about that somebody that looks different or feels different comes into the boardroom and they feel they belong, because the danger then is they just assimilated and they just become the power group. It's that they feel that their uniqueness is valued and that their voice is heard and appreciated and is factored into the decision making. And I think that organisations that succeed in the future will be those organisations that enable people to feel their uniqueness is genuinely valued. And if I look at some of the folks that I know, some of the chairs that I know that I think do an amazing job at doing exactly that, it's because they're just incredibly curious people. So I can remember meeting one chair who is just stunning in my world. And the first thing he said is, Christy, you used to work at John Lewis Partnership. We've got a problem in here, here and here. What do you think we should do about that? And it's like, hold on, I worked there about 30 years ago. I'm not sure that I have a valid comment to make. He said, oh no, you will. I want to know. And we'd barely been introduced, but straight away it was like, tell me about this. And I think that's what I'm looking for. So this old notion of positional power, the command and control, the one person has all the knowledge and all the answers, and you do as I say, by the way. I think folks that have the elegance, the curiosity, the intellect to go, ooh, I sort of know that I don't know an awful lot of things. Tell me about it. I think that's what the board in the future will look like. It will look very different, but also feel very different. I think at the moment we're still working and organisations are still shaped like a pyramid. Interesting that ThoughtWorks is not. It's a much flatter organisation. And I do think in the future, particularly in the UK, those much flatter structures are much more agile. I know agile is a totally overused word, but it's such a great word to describe just allowing people into the boardroom who have a completely different perspective. It shouldn't be about where they sit in the hierarchy. That doesn't give them knowledge. That doesn't make what they know relevant. It's the people right next to your customer that are probably going to bring you the perspective that you need. So I think that what I'm interested in is a boardroom that has no walls. It doesn't have windows, it doesn't have doors. It's much more open and it's a much more fluid entity that brings in all sorts of different perspectives from around the organisation.
Fascinating, but probably not that far away. Christine, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Okay, definitely my 20-year-old self, I said, don't take it so personally. So I think I have been quite resilient throughout my career, but then I do feel the pain sometimes. And much as one can rationalise it, I would definitely go back to my 20-year-old self and like, you honestly don't sweat it. This is not the end of the world. Don't take it personally. Actually, this is great feedback. So learn from it and move on. You know, the measure of us as people is the way we are able to take that feedback and grow and develop. It's what we do next that defines us, not the problem that happened in the past.
Christine, thank you. What a rich conversation today. I really appreciate it.
It's lovely. Thank you so much.